Rector, members of the General Council, it's a tremendous pleasure to give this report. This is the 14th time I've made this report, and which, as you know, is specified in the 1858 Act, and it was repeated in the 1889 Act. So I have a legal duty to account to you for how the university has been going in the last year, and I have a legal obligation to listen to and respond to any questions or comments that you have. I want to start by thanking the General Council. It was extremely effective at lobbying. It was very noticeable in the debate about the Scottish Government's Higher Education Governance Bill that the voice of the General Council of Edinburgh was heard very loudly, and also the voice of the General Council of the University of St Andrews. That was extremely important. It was a very ineptly drafted bill. One highlight was that the bill specified, and this was supposed to be an improvement in accountability to stakeholders, that 2 alumni should be elected to be on the governing body. And you, of course, will all know that since 1858, 3 General Council assessors have been on the University of Edinburgh Court. So quite extraordinary. And it would have actually, if it had been passed as originally drafted, forced the university to actually be less accountable to the General Council than it currently is. So quite extraordinary. Well, there also was a very inept thing about our Senate. But the lobbying was successful in quite a number of regards, including that one. So I really appreciate that activity. I appreciate Professor Swainson's work as convener of the Business Committee, a lot of very good contributions to the university, and Mike Mitchell's work as Secretary of the General Council. And I really, the 3 court assessors continue to make a really vital contribution to the work of governing the university, so I appreciate that. I also like having the company when we need to process up the High Street in the rain on a Sunday to magnificent ceremonies in St Giles. And it is very noticeable that one sees more representation from the General Council than one does from the staffers. I think you set a very good public position there. And can I add my thanks to Mary Scott for the great work she has done in keeping things running smoothly. Before I start my presentation, I do want to say that I'm delighted that we are in this new location. This obviously is a historic building. It served as the infirmary, and Lister walked the corridors and invented antiseptics here. It served as the high school, and Walter Scott studied here. We turned it into an awful mess in the 20th century, and it was just a higgledy-piggledy set of low-ceilinged rabbit warrens. And I think one of the great joys of our building programme in the university has been the way that we have addressed some of these legacy buildings. This is obviously an incredibly important legacy building with a wonderful Regency frontage. It is actually a pair of buildings. And the place in the middle with the wonderful toplit is the courtyard between two buildings, two old buildings that have been beautifully combined, and they've got the highest BREEAM rating, which is very appropriate for the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation. That is to say, they have the highest rating with regard to insulation, loss of heat and use of power that it is possible for a building to have, despite being essentially a pair of Georgian buildings. So we're very proud of it. The building programme was mentioned. For the last number of years, we've been spending about £75 million a year, which can be conceptualised each year. And it's quite as tight as that, but it can be conceptualised as a £50 million new building, 10 million pounds refurbishment, and £5 million worth of tidying up. And we're about to double that activity. So we will move from spending about 75 million a year on the estate to about 130 million. And that's proof of the health of your university. If you go out to Easterbush, you see the wonderful pair of buildings, the Roslin and the Vet School, together about £100 million worth of glorious new build. If you go along the Cowgate towards where the back route to the Parliament, towards Murray House, you'll see £120 million worth of quite beautiful postgraduate accommodation. I do encourage you to go and look. You'll see the largest student kitchen, More than 1,000 students there share a single kitchen that is beautifully fitted with wonderful cooking stations and with, to my amazement, we supply the cooking pots and everything. The thing, and absolutely gorgeous furniture. Most of us would instantly give that kitchen furniture house room ourselves. But it is a very, very nice facility. But there is a wonderful combination of refurbishments like this and some of the buildings around George Square and exciting new builds. On to my presentation then. If you look by college at the university, and we have 35,000 students, we have, since 2002, been growing at a rate of about a little bit more, about 1,000 students a year in student population. We were about 21,000 plus then. We're now 35,000. 61% are in humanities and social sciences, so that's the big. That would be big for a British university on its own. So that is a large, mostly centred around George Square. 24% in science and engineering, and then 15% in medicine and veterinary medicine. And that is a very big medical school. A medical school with 5,500 students in, by any world standards, that is one of the biggest that you've got. So we are very, very substantial. In terms of level of study, for a university that's consistently in the world top 25, we are odd. We have 23,000 undergraduates, so you instantly see where almost 2/3 of the student body is undergraduates. Because international reputation is so driven by research, most of the major research universities might be 50% postgraduate, they might be even more. So we are a bit interesting in that regard, in that we have such a high proportion of undergraduates. And we have a very healthy number of students doing doctorates. I've been holding receptions for first-year students doing doctorates. And we have 5,000 of those. These are very important students. They are the academic future. They come to us from all over the world. Once they've got their doctorates, they will take up positions in industry, in other universities, and they will be the network that 10, 15 years from now my future colleagues will be working with. So those 5,000 students working towards a PhD, they are an immensely important asset for the university, and obviously they need nurtured. Where do the students come from? Well, as you can see, about 1/3 come from Scotland. Sometimes people say, oh my gosh, University of Edinburgh isn't as Scottish as it was. And in some percentage sense, that's true. But are there more Scottish students here than there were when you were a student? Yes. The number of Scottish students rises every year. It is now more than 12,000. And for some of you, there weren't 12,000 students in the whole university when you were students here. So we have a lot of Scottish students, 12,000. We have 10,000 students from outside the EU. We have a lot of English, Welsh and Northern Irish students, 8,000. And then we have a respectable almost 4,500 from the other parts of the European Union. Where do the students come from? Well, very recently, it used to be that the United States of America was the big cohort. It's been overtaken by the People's Republic of China, and that is interesting. Obviously, the People's Republic of China is much bigger in population terms than the United States. It's 4 times bigger. And obviously, it's got an economy which until very recently was booming. It's still got an economy with a growth rate that we would die for. And so we have, from the People's Republic of China, got 2,400 students and almost 2,400 students from the United States of America. The figure from the United States of America is interesting to me. That seems quite a lot, and as you can instantly work out, that's about 6% of the student body. Any guesses when Principal Robertson, during the Enlightenment, 1780s, what percentage of our students came from the United States then? And here is an incentive. If somebody gets within 2%, there's a pint of claret for you. So shout You need to put your hand up. Any guesses? What was the percentage of students from the United States in 1780? There's a pint of claret.
5%.
Huh?
5%.
5%. Any other guesses?
3%.
Huh?
3.
3. There's a 30 there.
10.
10. Well done. Exactly right. Exactly right. I will. Thank you. There were 10%. They were nearly all studying medicine, because we were obviously, although some were studying divinity because they wanted to be Presbyterian ministers. But no, so when people say, "Gosh, you've got a lot of United States students," well, in the 1780s, 10% of our students. And they came. Why did they come here? They came here because Thomas Jefferson said this was the best university in the world. If you were a US family that had a son that wanted to go to medical school and you could afford it, you wouldn't mess about with the northeast of the United States. You'd send them to the best university in the world, which was, of course, Edinburgh. And then we see Germany very strong. Germany is interesting. Any ideas? Which school are, as it were, the biggest subsection of these German students going to? Law. That's right, law. And you notice if you walk around law and you say to them, "Why are you here?" Because we don't teach German law. And they say, "Oh, but I'm interested in international law." No, so we have a very strong reputation in Germany for law. Obviously, Canada. Hong Kong is there, very, very strong indeed. Singapore is strong. And Taiwan doesn't make it onto this list. But if you move from China to students whose first language is Mandarin or Cantonese, then you're up at about 3,500 in our community. Very, very strong with Malaysia. Any idea why that Malaysia number is really quite high if you think about it? Why is that Malaysia number so high? Anybody know? If you get a postgraduate place at the University of Edinburgh from Malaysia, because our standing is so high, the Malaysian government pays your fees and costs. So, if you're sitting in Kuala Lumpur wondering where should I apply to, then you have to trade that against the weather, but it will come as a free good. Likewise, Norway is not a very big country. Historically, it's changed now, sadly, but it used to be the case that if you were a Norwegian and you got a place at the University of Edinburgh, again, because of our status, the Norwegian government would cover all your costs. Sadly, it doesn't do that anymore. But so very interesting pattern. And interesting to see Greece so strong. That's not a really big population country. And to see Lithuania there. So, I'm particularly interested myself in smallish countries that send a lot of students here. And quite often there are different stories into that. So that's where they're coming from. And here's the bad news. If you were applying now, you wouldn't all get in. Sorry about that, but we had almost 60,000 applications, and we let slightly more than 6,000 in. Nearly every one of those 60,000 applications was in the jargon competent. That is to say, they had the higher or the A-level grades necessary to get in. So it wasn't that we had 20 or 30,000 people apply who weren't equipped to study at the University of Edinburgh. We had 60,000 people applied who pretty much were all equipped to study, and obviously we went for the most deserving 6,000 of those. Lots of personal chairs in humanities and social sciences, some very important professorships. Really pleased that David Finkelstein has joined us to take charge of the Centre for Open Learning. Very pleased that we've got a chair of digital learning in Judy Robertson, and obviously the Grierson chair. Vital, and gosh, Professor Jacobson could do well if he could explain to us what the financial markets are up to. When the Queen went to visit the London School of Economics, I think in about 2009, she said to the collective professors of economics there, "So why didn't you tell us what was going to happen?" And a lot of very important honorary professorships in there, and personal chairs in very important personal chairs in medicine and veterinary medicine. 2 in the area of gynecology. Our link to the city is manifest in different ways, but one of the ways it's manifest is that the city overruled the grumpy professors of medicine in the 19th century and insisted that the university get into women's medicine. So against the opposition. Who could imagine that, eh? Conservative medical professors. I fancy that. But the city, particularly because of issues in childbirth, insisted that the university appoint a professor in that area. And the second professor, obviously, was Simpson, who was not interested in anaesthetics. His interest to start with was much more focused. He was interested in reducing pain during childbirth. That was his starting position. And actually anaesthetics it took something like, Charles will know exactly, but it took more than 30 years before the anaesthetics that was successfully being used to reduce pain in childbirth was used for things like reducing pain while your leg was being sawn off on the battlefield, because it wasn't felt appropriate to use it for military surgery. Some very, very, very important professorships. Interesting to see where we're going. Chair of Tropical Livestock, absolutely key area. Chair of the Molecular Pathology of Cancer. Very important honorary professorships. And then in Science and Engineering, again. And these are, for me, very interesting because it tells you where the university is going. So if you look at this list here, you see a chair of higher education learning contexts. Also Professor Rigby has now left us to be Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Hull. Not called Hull anymore, called Lincoln. You see a chair in the mathematics of software engineering. And then if you look at the established chairs, chair of technology-enhanced science education, another chair, another 4 chairs of technology-enhanced science education. And in fact, each of the 7 schools of the Centre of the College of Science and Engineering now has a chair in this area. We've gotten some extraordinarily powerful people. The one I'm most delighted with on that list is Jonathan Silvertown, a very famous biologist. He's introduced a piece of software called iSpot, which is used around the world and was used, for example, by a young 8-year-old girl to successfully identify a moth that had never been seen in the United Kingdom before. But this is software that is used worldwide. He held a chair with great distinction at the Open University, and we basically had a sort of tussle of love between biology and geosciences here, so he was given a joint chair between the 2 schools as he arrived. So we've been recruiting some very good people and some very nice honorary professorships. A lot of international acclaim. Igor Stix, Order des Arts et Lettres. Professor Charlesworth, who keeps getting honours. The Genetic Societies of Americas, Morgan Medal. Use of Teaching Awards, very important. The students' evaluation and their competition. And these awards, nomination for these awards and success taken immensely seriously by the academic staff. Chancellor's Awards, and really some key folk there. Elizabeth Bromberg with wonderful teaching. Margaret with tremendous work in oncology and cancer. And Nicholas Mills with wonderful work in the area of heart disease. Also, we give awards for people who have done things for the student community and for the community associate. And I would encourage you to read in greater detail. I'm very, very proud of our annual review. Ian Conn and his colleagues in communication and marketing work very hard to produce a good one. It is easily our best document. And then Sarah Keir won the award, Tam Diel Award, for engaging the public with science, a key area for us. We're coming up to the Science Festival in Easter. The university has a tremendous presence there. Very pleased that we had appropriate honours associated with the university in the Queen's New Year's honours and in the birthday honours. Fabulous set of honorary graduates going and very international. I'd particularly point out to you Gordon Aikman, who's just somebody who is very obvious motor neuron disease himself, working from a wheelchair, organising others, and just having a tremendous impact, not just in Scotland or the UK, but worldwide in terms of support for those with MND. And Luke Downey, really inspiring person, Luke. He got a degree in anthropology for us. He did his research, as anthropologists typically go abroad in demanding places. Luke went somewhere very demanding. He worked in the favela, in the slum, the big slum in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He was working with young people. He noticed that many of the young men he was working with during the course of his degree were killed because they would be sent off to buy drugs by one gang, seen on the street by another gang, and they would be shot. And that really distressed him. So after he finished his degree, he went back and he set up something called Fight for Peace. Fight for Peace is a large blue structure in the middle of the favela. I went to visit him there. It's quite dangerous. As you go towards the favela, first of all, you discover that your driver will not go in, won't even think about it. And then as you approach it, you see there are spikes on the road, and near the spike, there will be a 7 or 8 year old nursing a pistol. And you think, oh dear. And then you notice that sitting in the shade is a teenager with a machine gun who's minding the young boy with the pistol. And you think, gosh, this is a bit of a rough place. It is a very rough place. And in the middle of it, there is Luke. And what Luke does is he asks himself the question, what could you do with violent young men to take them out of this culture? And his answer was quite simple. You get them to be very good at violent sports. So he teaches them karate. Luke himself was a champion boxer. He represented the university. I think he also represented the UK. He was a very good boxer himself. So these young men are encouraged in to learn really quite rough sports like karate, kickboxing, regular boxing. After they've done that for a while and become motivated, then they're taught other things like employment skills. And eventually they end up, they've got, one of the things they have in Fight for Peace is do primary school in a year. And they take young boys who can barely read and write but can fire a gun, and a year later they can read and write and do arithmetic and have become sort of employable. So it is very, very inspiring, and I think it has to be a matter of enormous pride for the university that one of our anthropology students should do this as a direct consequence of their anthropological work as a University of Edinburgh student. If you are in Rio and you're feeling brave, I would encourage you to go. But try not to tell. Don't tell your driver where you're going. Just until you're quite close, because they won't go there. But it is a very, very inspiring thing indeed. And here's the interesting thing, which I feel I ought to tell you. Why is this big concrete structure bright blue? Why would a big concrete box be bright blue? Any guesses? Think about big buildings that are bright blue. Huh?
United Nations?
No. Anybody? Any other big buildings that are bright blue? Yes? At the back?
Greek Orthodox churches.
It's not a Greek Orthodox church, no. It's IKEA. The big corporate sponsor is IKEA. So from the outside, it does look like a place you could buy meatballs and hard-to-assemble furniture. And I think it is. When Luke tried to raise money, the banks, a lot of respectable organisations wouldn't touch it because they just didn't like the idea of the association with drugs and violence. So the firm that stepped in to provide the serious money to keep Luke's operation going is actually IKEA, and I think it's just an enormous credit to them. So I encourage you to go to that big blue box on the way to Midlothian and buy some meatballs, because some of the money will find its way back to Brazil. But anyway, some very, very inspiring, and I'm delighted that Fabiola Gianotti, Fabioli was in charge of the experimental work at CERN. She was, as it were, the number 2 to Rolf Hoyer when the work on the Higgs Collider, when the work on the Large Hadron Collider that led to the discovery of the Higgs boson was done. She's been an honorary professor of ours for a long time. She's now succeeded Rolf as the Director General of CERN. Tremendously important association for the university. And then here are some more key figures, and Stuart Monroe, who is our wonderful vice convener. Very pleased that he is there. I'm very pleased that Lord McConnell is there. When Lord McConnell was First Minister, he made the intervention on the Fresh Talent Initiative that permitted international, and that was really, you know, sometimes people will say, oh no, it wasn't the politician, it was the civil servant or whatever. In this case, because I had direct interaction with him on this, because I went to Jack McConnell to ask him to find a way to get the Scottish Government to cover international students' visa fees, there is no question that he gets personal credit for this very important initiative, just in the way that the Open University actually did come out of Harold Wilson's head while he was on holiday, and not some of the other people who claim to have invented it. It is also the case that Jack really does get the primary credit for the fresh, and that's one of the reasons why we're in such a strong international position. That put us on a curve where we've stayed. So where are we? Well, our income keeps rising, 841 million. Give you some context, since 2002 that's tripled. Research grants representing 29% of income. An interesting number that's not there is formula funding from the Scottish Government, which is now at a quarter, less than our research grants. Quarter of the money we get. And you might ask yourself rhetorically, is that really a basis for continuing to fiddle around with our governments? Anyway, 25% comes from there. A key thing, which the Scottish Government is very pleased about, and we're very pleased about, is we created 44 new companies last year. And if you go into the vicinity of the university now, you go to Argyle House, probably the ugliest 60s building in the middle of town, even uglier than the Appleton Tower, built by the government for originally as a tax office. So many residents have fond memories of going to Argyle House to argue with the tax inspectors in it. What is it now? Well, it's got our IS in part, but it's got floors of start-up companies, mostly coming out of the University of Edinburgh, mostly having a technology aspect. Just as that ugly 60s building alongside the Dick Vet is full of companies. And I mean, one of the nice things about computer scientists like me is if they start companies, you don't need to put them in something shiny with glass. They don't need any lasers or stuff. You can just put them in the ugliest little box you can find, and provided they've got Wi-Fi and a paper and pencil, then they'll be able to start their business. And, and our net assets are heading towards 2 billion, quite substantial. We had in the year Old Colleges and Open Air Cinema, which was lovely, India and South Asia Week. We keep on doing new things with our massive open online courses. Had more than 2 million learners now. In October, we launched a MOOC on understanding football. We want to help Scotland. Obviously it's a long game, but we introduced our robot football team a couple of years ago, and we've now introduced online education for the general Scottish public called Understanding Football. And I encourage all of you to sign up for this massive open online course, which you will find me speaking. And when you see me speaking, you'll see me standing. It's a new massive open online course called Stand Up, Get Fit. And it's produced by a partnership between public health and sport. And it's about how people like yourselves can become fitter by spending less time sat on the television eating chocolates, sat on the sofa watching television and eating chocolates, and more time standing or walking around or running, and things like that. So look out for it. All you need to do is Google Stand Up, University of Edinburgh, and you'll find yourself in a massive open online course, and as a result of taking it, you'll be a healthier and happier person. Very moving commemoration of the First World War, and of course, in terms of the history of the University of Edinburgh, such a powerful and emotional thing. You just look at the War Memorial, you see those, those photographs, 1914, 15, 16, of columns of young men in uniform going down Princes Street. These were University of Edinburgh students going off to be killed in France. So it is a very powerful thing for us. And also, you know, Elsie Inglis and all the women associated with the university who went off against instruction to be nurses in France. So it's, in terms of our university's history, they were, first of all, very powerful. We did tremendously well in the research excellence framework. We keep on looking for scholarships in different places. We're getting good support. Deutsche Post has given us good support, which is nice, and we are looking more and more at different international foundations for support, particularly for international students. We have the best bursaries in Britain, so for students within the United Kingdom applying to us, we are good. But as you've seen from the figures, we have many thousands coming to us from the rest of the European Union and from the rest of the world, and we need to get scholarships for them too, so we're working hard at that. Innovative Learning Week, lots of things, including the overhaul of a local primary school, Edinburgh College of Arts Fashion doing very, very well, support from the UK government for the biology complex and new centre for tissue repair. And as I said, we do get 25% formula funding from the Scottish Government, but we get an awful lot of capital for very important scientific buildings from the UK Government. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, has a highly commendable agenda, and while I'm mentioning him, I should also say he is a direct supporter of Luke Downey and Fight for Peace. Sort of a thing that might make some politicians nervous, but at number 11 Downing Street he hosted a spectacular event for Luke, which I was privileged to be at, to raise funds for the work that Luke is doing, in the wonderful work that Luke is doing in Brazil. We had Spy Week, and as you know, many of your fellow alumni, and probably a couple of you in the room, are spies. Another part of the university's involvement was GCHQ, past and present, MI5 and 6, and of course Bletchley Park, very well known. We have wonderful mathematicians. How wouldn't we have the odd spy or code breaker, as we do? Wonderful sporting alumni, and very good to read the recent news results, newspaper accounts of the scientific, the gravitational wave discovery. This university, like Glasgow, has been banging on about dark matter for more than 40 years. So for us to finally see, like the Higgs boson, something that we were saying, our scientists were saying, was the case more than 40 years ago, has now been physically demonstrated to be the case, actually only a couple of days ago. So that is very exciting. Very important work on dementia. We had the most successful meeting in the Carlisle Circle. The Carlisle Circle is the more than 1,400 alumni who have made serious provision for the university in their wills. We had a meeting in London focusing on dementia last week. It was incredibly powerful. We had Sally Magnuson, who's obviously written a wonderful book about her mother's fight with dementia, who gave personal testimony. We had Professor Church, who leads the School of Health and Social Science, who does work on how one should structure nursing homes, but also private homes to support people with dementia. And then we had Professor Ritchie, who is a wonderful medical scientist whose work is concerned with the prevention of dementia and what can be done to either slow it down or stop it. So 3 very powerful speakers, but the biggest turnout I have ever seen for a car. We were just scouring the Caledonian Club for more chairs and having to bring them in. It was absolutely packed. And there's a nice picture of Professor Ritchie, who's our most important, on the left there, most important recent recruit, who is an international expert that we recruited from Imperial London on the prevention of dementia. Edinburgh Award, doing very well, and is a way of giving recognition for student volunteering, which is a massive activity. Thousands of hours of work, helping actually thousands of people in Edinburgh in different ways. Mentioned ERI, but we are one of the best universities in the world for commercialisation. Raising 237 million, a cumulative total of more than 400 companies. This is serious stuff, and it's serious stuff which is very noticeable. When you read in the newspapers, and both The Guardian and The Times have had articles recently saying Edinburgh is now only second to London for technical startups, those technical startups pretty much only come from the one place, They come from informatics, they come from George Square, and they're in the vicinity here. So we are an immensely powerful driver for that, and we know now, we have a really good understanding about how you support these companies in their early stages. Doing very well in our relationship with China, new joint degree with Zhejiang University. The sister of this building is in Hong Kong. I opened it with the First Minister in the summer, and it is very attractive because it is badged with the University of Edinburgh badge. It is closely related to this, and it is paid for entirely by the Hong Kong government. So, which seems to be an extremely sound arrangement. And that is, I think that's a demonstration of the power of the university. If you go, a few days' time, I shall be in Bangalore. In Bangalore, there is the National Centre, Indian Centre for Brain Repair, right? A very powerful neuroscience centre, funded by the Indian Ministry of Science. And when you go and look at the logo on the door, there are two logos. There is the National Centre for Biological Sciences of India, and there is the University of Edinburgh. It has got our scientists and their scientists, paid for by the Indian government. And next time you're in Shanghai, I strongly encourage you to go to Donghua University, China's leading fashion university. I encourage you for two reasons. One is they have a stunning museum of fashion with all sorts of, particularly showing the transition from traditional Chinese costume to what we think of as sort of characteristic. Your keronsangs and such, Chinese dress, which is actually mostly invented by French tailors working for the European community in Shanghai. But that whole story is depicted. And you'll also see a lovely building in which students are learning fashion. These are students who will end up spending a year or two in Edinburgh. You'll see the University of Edinburgh logo on the door. You may bump into a flying academic from Edinburgh College of Art. And there is, this is the thing you will enjoy the most, a wonderful server room which is called the Fashion Cloud. And it has got in it computers with massive databases of different designs for garments. Isn't that fabulous? The Fashion Cloud. And we have a co-stake in this, and this is paid for entirely by the municipal government of Shanghai, who thinks it's a good thing. We had another MOOC, Understanding Scottish Independence, very successful, and we have established something new in the world of massive open online courses, that is ones that happen in real time. Until Charlie Jeffrey and colleagues did the one for the Scottish referendum, nobody had done a massive open online course where day by day the data that was being analysed would change. But if you remember, and I'm sure you've all been successful at forgetting, but if you are unfortunate enough to remember the Scottish referendum, then you'll remember that just before it, there was a Sunday Times poll which said it was going to be a yes vote. If you were taking that MOOC on that Sunday, gosh, it was busy. It was busy, and it was full of students and tutors, all of whom were being surprised by this real-time event that they had not predicted. That is to say, a poll that said the independence vote was going to be a yes. So that's so. Very, and now, of course, this is a model that has been copied around the world, but it's a way of using massive open line courses that was invented by us in the exciting context of the Scottish referendum. We've got our Centre for Constitutional Change, and obviously the EU referendum will give us another opportunity for an exciting real-time MOOC. We're doing tremendously well on big data, collaboration between the 5 leading universities in Britain. Why, you might be surprised. You might say to yourself, that sort of makes sense, but why Warwick? Well, Warwick is either the best or the second best, depending how you view Cambridge, university in Britain for mathematics. Big data does not just depend on being able to build very large computers. Also, you have to build very large computers, as we do, and as we have been in Edinburgh for a long time. But you also need to be very sophisticated with the mathematics. So the Alan Turing Institute combines Britain's best computer science with Britain's best mathematics. Very, very powerful. And for us, it means now, as a consequence of the Alan Turing Institute, we will be hosting an Intel Advanced Architecture Group. Intel is, as you will know, if you've got a smartphone or a computer at home, it almost certainly is powered by an Intel chip. Doesn't matter what it says on the outside, 80% of the powerful computer processors in the planet come from Intel. And the people who designed the new architectures, they're coming to join us as an appropriate place to do that. And that for us is a massive win indeed. And just to go back to that one, Intel, we have had tremendously good support from the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney. And in fact, to be accurate, overnight I received a very nice email from the Deputy First Minister's office offering our Intel colleagues a dinner in Bute House. So getting very, very focused and good support from the Scottish Government. Do a lot on deaf education, has been a key area for us for a long time, but we apply technology there. And this is a really helpful thing, looking at banking and where it is going, trying to make it more robust. I think we would all like more robust banks. No, well, maybe you would like a more exciting life. I would like more robust banks, certainly. And we are doing lots of stuff with scientific engagement in geoscience, in chemistry, in outreach in music. Summary, we're doing immensely well. All the serious world league tables has us in the world top 25. We are incredibly diverse. It is part of our strategy. We aim to cover all the different types of engineering. We've got a very big veterinary school as well as a very big medical school. That's on purpose. We are now going into agriculture to even broaden that base. We keep on teaching new languages. I'm very proud of that. Very, very important that we do that. We had a visit from the Finnish ambassador yesterday. One of the reasons we have good relationships with many of the smaller countries in Europe is because we are, and actually we had a visit from Russian too, who gave us a big present, beautiful books, the Ivan the Terrible history. But to go back to the smaller countries, obviously we've been teaching Russian for zonks, but we are increasingly doing more with the more countries that have languages that have a smaller population base, you know, like Finnish, like Hungarian, like Gaelic, even Welsh, gosh, isn't that? So we're doing very well in diversity. Our research is world leading in very important areas like the environment, like medicine, amazingly strong company formation. We make a local impact, a national impact, and obviously we're a world player. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.